Chapter 8. Secrets of the Flow. The night air clung to the village like a wet shroud as the group entered Waya's dwelling. The tension from the battle at the crater had not fully lifted. It lingered in the air like static before a storm. The wolves padded in silently, their bodies tense with instinctive wariness. The single-room shelter was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, built directly into the roots of the ancestor tree. The roots curved along the walls like petrified ribs, forming a natural dome overhead. The faint shimmer of mana coursed through the veins of the wood, casting pale green shadows along the floor. In the center of the room, Waya knelt beside the hearth. She whispered a few words, and the flames rose, casting a warm amber glow that softened the earthy walls. The scent of burning sage and resin filled the space. Dolo followed Mako inside, spear still in hand. His heart hadn't stopped racing since the battle ended. His body felt strangely light, like the wind hadn't entirely left him after the fight. The sensation of gliding across the battlefield remained vivid, and each step felt as if the ground itself were pushing him forward. Mako said nothing as he entered. His movements were sharp, tense. He sat on the edge of a wooden bench near the doorway, jaw clenched, fingers drumming absently against the haft of his axe. The mana that had surged through him during the battle still simmered beneath his skin. He didn't understand it, and that lack of control gnawed at him. Irindra stood near the far wall, arms crossed. Her sharp green eyes followed Eros as the boy shuffled to the hearth and sat cross-legged on the woven rug. The mana shard pulsed faintly in her hand like a heartbeat. Kaelin, Waya's apprentice, entered last. She adjusted the embroidered sash across her shoulder and knelt beside the hearth. Her gaze flitted toward the shard in Irindra's palm. The wolves settled near the entrance. Fenra lay down with her head resting on her paws, though her eyes remained fixed on Aros. The fire crackled softly. The air hummed with quiet anticipation. Waya exhaled and placed her staff against the wall. "This," she said, gesturing toward the mana shard, "is older than we realize, older than this village, perhaps older than this forest itself." Irindra shifted uncomfortably. "It came from the crater. If it's so old, why would it emerge now?" "The world tree woke it," Waya replied. "When Aros fell, he tore through the veil that separated the world from mana's flow. The shard is part of that awakening." Aros's eyes lifted toward the shard. His lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. Dolo rubbed the back of his neck. "Why would the world tree send Eros here of all places?" "Because the world is rotting," Waya said softly. "The shadow tribes have tainted it for generations. They've turned the land against itself. The world tree, the source of natural mana, has always been the Earth's guardian. But it cannot act directly, so it sent the avatar of mana." The word avatar hung heavily in the room. Aros shifted on the rug, his small fingers tracing circles along the edge of his cloak. The crackling of the fire reflected in his golden eyes. "I don't feel like an avatar," he muttered. "You aren't one yet," Waya said gently. "But you will be." The wolves growled softly in unison. Fenra lifted her head. "The land stirs when he moves," the alpha wolf said, her voice flowing along the silent current of Aros's mana. "The earth knows his name." Irindra's breath caught. The words reached her as clearly as if the wolf had spoken them aloud. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dolo gave a slow nod. "I did. We all did." He hesitated. "The mana, it changed us. Anyone touched by it can hear them now. I can feel the wolves when they're close, and the wind, it listens when we move." Kaelin's brow furrowed. "That happened to me too," she said. "When I caught the shard, I felt connected to the trees." Their roots, their branches, I could feel their thirst for water, their relief when the rain touched their leaves. Waya nodded slowly. Mana is not power in the way shadow magic is power. It is connection. Those who open themselves to it will feel the world around them more deeply, but that connection demands balance. The elder reached for the thick tome beside the hearth. Its leather cover was etched with faint spirals that shimmered under the firelight. Waya ran her fingers along the edge of the binding and opened it with reverence. "The Book of Way," she said, "passed down through generations of my coven. Within it lie the secrets of the flow, the ancient art of weaving elemental mana into spells." Mako leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed. "Flow?" "Mana is the foundation of all life," Waya explained. "It moves through the world like currents in a river. The ancients learned to attune themselves to these currents, bending the elements to their will. They called this process flow spells." She turned the book toward them. The pages showed drawings of robed figures standing amidst elemental storms. One raised a hand to summon torrents of water. Another wielded a spear crackling with lightning. Another still was grounded with both hands on the earth, roots and stones surging upward like shields. "Air, earth, fire, water," Waya continued. "Each element offers abilities to those who attune to its flow. The elements are alive. They respond to emotions, to instinct, to need." She looked at Dolo. "The wind lent you its speed and precision because you called upon it without fear. You moved as the wind does, fluid, unburdened." Dolo shifted uncomfortably. "It felt natural, like the air wanted me to move faster." "It did," Waya said, "because the wind seeks freedom." She turned her gaze to Mako. "But Earth does not respond like the wind." Mako's fingers twitched. "Yeah, I noticed. Earth is patient, stubborn. It resists until it decides to lend its strength. When you struck the ground at the crater, you didn't simply use your strength. The mana amplified it, making the earth itself move beneath your will." Mako looked down at his hands. "Then why does it feel so cold?" The wolves stirred. Fenra rose, ears flattened. "Because your heart carries the memory of shadow," the Alpha said. "Mana remembers what the mind forgets." Mako's head snapped up. "I didn't forget." His voice was cold. Dolo frowned. "Mako." "I remember everything," Mako said, voice strained. "The day the Shadow Tribes killed my family, the black mist wrapping around my father's throat, the stench of burning flesh, the laughter of the shaman as he walked past my hiding place." His hands trembled. "I remember it all." The wolves remained utterly still. The fire dimmed slightly. "The mana within you clings to that memory," Waya said softly. "The flow of earth mirrors the bearer's spirit. If you wield it through rage, it will respond with destruction." Mako's eyes darkened. He said nothing. Irindra shifted uneasily. "My people don't trust mana," she said into the silence. "When it disappeared after the cataclysm, we celebrated. It brought us closer to the natural cycles of life." She hesitated, glancing at Aros. "But tonight, when the boy touched the shard, I felt something different. Not just power. A sense of purpose." Aros looked at her. "Because you were with me before," he said. Irindra straightened. "What?" Aros stared into the fire. "I don't remember everything," he admitted. "But when I touched the shard, I saw us, standing around a tree older than time. There was you, Dolo, Mako, and Kaelin. We fought together." Kaelin shook her head. "That's impossible. I've never left this village." "But your soul has," Oros said. His voice trembled slightly. "The world tree showed me glimpses. We were guardians, protectors of the mana flow. We died, but the bond between us didn't. His eyes flicked to Fenra. Even the wolves were there. The alpha wolf rumbled softly. The earth remembers. The tree remembers. And now, we remember. Wyatt turned more pages in the book. The next illustration depicted 5 figures standing beneath an enormous tree whose roots spiraled into the ground like veins. Symbols representing each element surrounded the figures. The words beneath read, "The Circle of Guardians, protectors of the balance, those who walk with mana shall rise again." The air shifted, the fire crackled louder. Aros's small voice broke the silence. "The World Tree didn't bring me here by accident. It sent me to find all of you." The wolves raised their heads in unison, sniffing the air. Fenra's growl deepened. "The shadow listens," she said. "We are not alone." Dolo rose instantly, spear raised. Mako followed, axe ready. The wind stirred beyond the shelter. The tree's roots vibrated beneath their feet. Aros's eyes glowed faintly. "They found us." Waya clutched the mana shard to her chest. "The shadow tribes." "No," Aros said. He stepped toward the doorway. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Furrow can.